Okay, welcome back to Bounce Around Charleston. Here with me now, Earl Bridges. Has a show called The Good Road, but let me tell y'all something. He's known as a philanthropologist. And the first thing I'm going to ask Earl to do is to tell our viewers about a philanthropologist. Earl Bridges, welcome to Bounce Around Charleston.
Randolph, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the time. It's interesting when you're trying to figure out what you're doing and you have an unconventional job. Yes. What exactly is that, Todd? How do you explain it to your kids? Basically, what we've done with the television show and what I've done for most of my life is traveled all over the world. But I've always been interested in the people, and I'm always interested in where is that good? I mean, when the world seems super dark, where's those bright lights that are out there, and I always find it, regardless. So I always say that the philanthropologist is somebody that is just searching for the good. What is those motivations of the people that are doing the different, good in the world? And I'm interested. I'm interested in stories.
Well, I read in your bio that you're a Charleston resident, but you grew up in Bangkok, Thailand. Tell us about that adventure.
Exactly. I was a military brat. My dad was an Air Force pilot. He was an F-4 Phantom pilot. So Vietnam era, I spent most of my time elementary school in Bangkok. And then later he got out of the Air Force after his 20 and went back as a missionary to Thailand. They stayed about 15 years, but I ended up graduating. And so those are the formative years, right? The very early times. My bar trick is that I speak Thai. I can read and write Thai, and it never comes in handy unless we're in a Thai restaurant. So if you ever get there, I'm your man.
Okay. Now, you have an Emmy nominated show called The Good Road. Tell us about The Good Road.
The Good Road is always meant to be, how do we celebrate these people that are doing some interesting things? I mean, you've traveled, we've all traveled, and every single place that you go to, the backdrop can be gorgeous, but the people are what really makes any of these places. And so whether that's Charleston or Holly Hill or Bangkok or wherever, the show is really meant to take people around, introduce a location in a travel format, and then celebrate this raw, edgy world of people doing good. We always say that we interview Batman, not Superman, because there's no agenda. It's, there's people that are never purely saints or purely evil, but there's good if you look for it. And that's really what the show does.
Well, I recognize some of the people that you've interviewed on your show, like our mayor.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, and others. So tell us, how do you look for your guests?
It's a good question. We start first and foremost with, well, first of all, I should say I travel with a kid that I've probably known my whole life since I was 9 years old, a guy named Craig Martin. He and I both grew up together in Bangkok, Thailand. And so, and Craig has films in 60 plus countries. So we look at it just like everyone else. Where would we like to go and travel? Season one, we went back to Thailand, so Bangkok, where we grew up, Myanmar, Kenya, Tanzania, et cetera. So we start with a location that is intriguing to us. And then the second thing is that where can we find some people that are really interesting? And we take them from all walks of life. And so when season two came out, Craig lives up in Richmond, Virginia. There's a lot going on in Richmond, Virginia. And so we felt like, how do we describe Richmond to somebody from the outside? And Charleston, as you mentioned, is the same thing. I live in Charleston because I love Charleston. I love the Low Country. I love everything about this city that I love. But there's so much underneath this veneer that we have that really make Charleston rich and interesting. And that's what we look for, is where can we tell a really good story, and how do we couch it inside of a really cool place to travel to?
So you're always looking for something new to do, interesting people to interview.
Right.
Have you received any feedback from some of your interviews?
Oh yeah, no, it's generally it's overly positive. As you know, in television, there's we keep maybe less than 5% of what we shoot. And so there's some editing that happens, but inside of that, I think we do a pretty level-handed way of describing the work that they do. You mentioned our mayor here, so he has not yet seen the episode that we'll do, but he helped to talk a little bit about climate change. And as you know, down in the Battery, we're doing some work around, building up that wall. And we talk about the hard things. We talk about the fact that those efforts disproportionately help the people that are affluent in the lower part of that Battery, and less so in the upper neck in the east side, development community and things like that. We ask them those types of questions. What are you thinking about, and how do we, think about Charleston? So again, we try to play it fair. We don't have an agenda, and I'm also not trying to tie it all up with a clean little bow at the end of it. you will love Charleston with its warts and with its, but with all the beauty and the same reasons that you and I love, the low country where we live.
I saw in your bio, you interviewed a young man that I grew up with, Quincy Baxter.
I love Quentin. And he grew up right here off of Morrison, just right up the street from where I'm sitting right now. In fact, I think I'm about 3 blocks away from where his hometown was. I got to meet his dad. Quentin, for those that don't know, he's the drummer. He has an illustrious career, but such a big guy that grew up in the church, playing the drums. He has so many good stories, and he's starting to do some interesting things as well now in the neighborhood where he grew up. He's got a nonprofit that he's kind of working on and trying to develop some of the musical talent that happens to be here. So a perfect example of somebody that for a long time was overlooked locally, and now with Ranky Tanky and their Grammy award-winning, songs and things like that, finally saw some real success, international success. But again, he's a kid that grew up right here in the, in the neck, right here in downtown Charleston.
Well, believe it or not, when I first started my ministry, he was my first drummer.
Oh no.
Yes. And I look at him now and I said, wow.
He talks about, he has a good story in our episode where he talks about growing up, and his mom, I think, maybe helped lead the music and things. And as he became an accomplished drummer, he starts to improvise, and his mom shut him down, made him sit down and say, you know what, you are not the show. You are following, this, but what we're doing in church is not about you and your drumming. And so it's very interesting. All of these guys, are just great influences to describe what's Charleston.
So how did you come up with the name, The Good Road?
It's funny. We actually started with this name called Good All Over. We felt like there was, there's an ability to go find good all over. But the problem that you get as soon as people start, it sounds like a charity show. No one wants to watch it. And I'm the same way. If it feels like we're trying to, fold into some agenda, then that's it. Right. So we said, what we really like doing is we like traveling. Let's lean into the travel component of it. And really that's our show. If you see us over season 1, season 2, and now we're filming season 3, you'll see us in boats and tuk-tuks and bicycles, on elephants, kind of all over these things. And it is about that travel. Let's take you somewhere as a viewer, and you find it out, you discover it just like we do. And so the travel component of it is really important to us.
So how did you feel when you got the news that you were being nominated for a daytime Emmy? That had to be something else.
And I will tell you, it's a national Emmy. And it's funny because you mentioned Quentin as well. He told me about the first time he got nominated for a Grammy and then later won the Grammy. And I didn't realize how important it is. A national Emmy is hard to get. There was over 3,000 submissions. So I knew it was, for a first-year show, for people that had not grown up in television, for us to get it was a big deal. So when we got the nomination, I was actually in South Dakota on a bike trail. I stopped as soon as I knew they were going to tweet it out. And I may have squealed a little bit out there on the trails. But again, I've got a better appreciation for it now. So the actual awards will be done on the 28th, July 28th. And again, we are not hoping to win. It is just great to be nominated. But in reality, if we win, you're going to hear me again somewhere.
So how can a person view your show?
We basically we're available on public television. They're rerunning all of season 1 and season 2. Season 1 will start airing in August. So any of your PBS stations are there. It's available on some streaming. So Amazon Prime, it will be available in a couple of weeks on Amazon Prime. If you fly on Delta Airlines, it's on there. So take a look at it. So we actually stream it out in a couple different places, but broadcast, it's largely in public television.
And so, and that's ongoing.
And it's ongoing. That's right. It's a syndicated model. It'll be in a primetime spot when we launch season 2. But again, generally people can find it on PBS or pbs.org.
So is there anything else you want to share with our viewing audience about The Good Road?
I guess what I would say is that it's always amazing. I, just like everyone else, is always surprised about the talent that we have here in town. You mentioned Quentin, but in our season 2, you're going to see, we interviewed 45 different people here in Charleston. There's some great stories that happen everywhere. And so I would encourage people to take a look at it. And again, you're going to fall in love with Charleston because we're going to show you some interesting folks that you may not have met before. And just like Randolph, there is good that happens everywhere.
Yes. Well, Earl Bridges, we just thank you for taking the time to talk to us on Bounce Around Charleston. I feel so honored to have you on the good road on Bounce Around Charleston.
Randolph, I appreciate it as well. It's a big honor. I appreciate it. I watch you guys all the time.
Thank you so much. And if anything we can do for you, let us know.
Thank you, Randolph. I appreciate it.
All right. You heard it right here on Bounce Around Charleston. We'll be right back after this break.